I find it way more exciting, to tell story where the narrative really creates more equality and models a better world. You have to partner up with companies, no matter where they are in the world, who believe in your vision, and then you have to do the due diligence, understanding who is your audience. The biggest mistakes are being made not to bring on a senior person as a guidance and follow that. I think, sometimes filmmaking can seem, which it is, a very passionate endeavor, but I feel like it's a business endeavor as well, because somebody will hand you money. And even if it's your own money, I would assume, you want it back. Hi, my name is Susanne Bohnet, and I currently produce films, but I started my distribution company a year ago. I'm a European citizen. I grew up in Germany. I lived in New York, and I had a scholarship actually for photography at Parsons School of Design. And my goal was always to make movies and to be a big Hollywood producer. So my son was born when I was in New York, more so as a big surprise. So I actually went back to Germany to finish my photography and film studies. And I had a very good run on German television, which provided, enough income as a young family. But I couldn't give up on my idea and on my vision to be in Hollywood on bigger films. So I moved to Los Angeles once my studies have been completed, and I was able to save money from, being a showrunner on German television. And I actually got my real start by moving with literally not knowing anybody and knowing very little about the industry to Los Angeles. The culture in Hollywood is, certainly very different of that in Europe. In Europe, and I think in the international marketplace, you have a very defined industry, like everybody easily knows each other, and it's typically the language of the country, but it's very limited because, who speaks German, or, who speaks Japanese. And if you come to America, you basically get to understand very quickly what you do in America drives the rest of the marketplace, the rest of the world. If you produce a successful film in America, this film has tremendous legs, still has today, to stand in the rest of the world. In terms of culture shock, you competing with the best and nobody. So I think the strategy of coming up with a really good plan how to enter the marketplace, I think that was the culture shock that, everybody thinks the person is a producer, and everybody thinks their script is good, and everybody thinks we know how to direct. And that's not enough to get your movie greenlit. I mean, that's not even the beginning. Probably I'm sounding very stereotypical, but it is so hard, and each film to get made is a miracle. So I'm proud of each and every one. It's just like your children, you end up being very proud about them. Maybe I share the first film. I never ended up getting a credit, but I was significantly involved because I believe that could be a fun and inspirational story. When I was very new and very young in LA with no connection and as a single mother, and thinking I'm a producer, I realized very quickly that maybe the point is not for me to promote myself as a producer. Maybe the point is to go back to an asset base I actually can rightfully represent. And as I had a lot of relationships in Germany to production entities and, finance entities who have financing available for, bona fide entertainment product, I quickly realized, why don't I go back to Germany for a couple of weeks and I tell them I can hook you up and make connections with Hollywood, more commercial material, which is something my country was not easily given access to. And via London, I was put in contact with icon Mel Gibson's company, and they just developed What Women Want. And I read the script and I loved it. And I was like, this is so, forward thinking. The idea of the metrosexual man was just, evolving. And there was this German company who is a public company who is extremely well financed, who owns TV stations. So I flew to Germany again and I met with them and I said, I have this great script. And they said, what is it about? And I said, oh, it's Mel Gibson and he falls in love with this woman. And instead of being a bad guy, he really tries to please her and he goes overboard. I never mentioned any scenes in the script, that he's trying on a pantyhose, because I knew those, very buttoned down German businessmen, they would have never gone to it. And I knew they would never read the script. So I basically narrated it in a way where I felt like they would think it's great, but where I knew maybe something comes out of it. So the first movie I was involved as I would think, executive producer packaging was What Women Want. And it became one of the most successful movies in Europe ever to that point. And it was at a time where I knew nothing, where I was really just realizing about myself, I need to find an angle for myself as a producer by not calling myself as a producer, by bringing something to the table, which parties, an entity in before Paramount was involved, they looked for money, and the German groups, they looked for content. So I ended up, I was never credited, but I ended up as a connector, as an arranger in, really putting a very big movie together at the time. And I was really learning a lot of producing by doing so. I think like every industry, the entire world is about change. So it's only natural that we part of this organic process, that our industry is continuously changing, and as producers, distributors, talent management people, we have to adjust to the change. I think it's exceptionally vulnerable to be an independent producer, like I have been most of my life in some sort of capacity, because the big question is always actually three things. How do you get access to financing? How do you get access to the kind of cast which will make your movie bankable? And how are you able to align distribution deals acceptable to yourself and everybody else? When I was running a film fund, we get to that later, I was running a film fund for several years. We've been the money, we did deals with studios, and there was not as much money in the marketplace as currently, where being the money allowed us a lot of leverage. And because we made mistakes in the beginning, but we learned from our mistakes very quickly. And down the line, we just worked with the best attorneys, and we had access to a lot of the best films, which allowed us, I think, to really make, good commercial deal terms, but as well to sort out really good projects. Currently, I feel like it's, from my point of view, it's a marketplace which is pretty overfinanced, overcapitalized. So there's a lot of money, and a lot of the money comes from, very big companies like Amazon, like Netflix, like Hulu, like Apple. And they're not coming to the marketplace very shy and intimidated. They're coming to the marketplace saying, we can do whatever we want, however we want to do it. And on the one hand, I think it creates incredible opportunity. On the other hand, for me as an independent producer, I am constantly competing on my own films where I'm offering more than the going rate for an actor, where I later on realized that my offer was just used to leverage another big TV offer, which is going on at the same time. So I feel like years ago, it was much easier to close with talent. And in today's marketplace, it has become very difficult. And of course, there are opportunities coming from that as well. I think once everybody understands, we're living in a marketplace where money is not the deciding factor, where access to cast is actually the deciding factor. And I think that allows you to align your business strategy as a producer, around that. My own personal sweet spot really has to do with, where the mission statement for my own company lies. And I'm now, I launched my company as a distributor a year ago in New York, Serafini Releasing. And I produced in Trinidad and Tobago, a small Caribbean island. I produced the movie for not a lot of money with a Caribbean male lead, a Indian British woman. It's kind of like a Shakespearean modern love story. It's a musical. We used Caribbean music, we used some Indian music, and we worked with Major Lazer and some other really big electronic DJ, and, I believe rocked an amazing soundtrack, and, which is selling well. And my company, we released the movie in the US, and we've been running for 8 weeks in theaters. And that's a business model, and it's not my only business model. That I believe in today's marketplace, as a producer, you need to know who's your audience, and you need to know what is the way to reach your audience. I mean, do you want to sell it to the studio? Do you want to be set up on television? I believe, as somebody who's been in the industry now for a good amount of time, I feel I like to be in control of my own destiny, meaning I find it exceptionally exciting to develop or to partner or to pick up something in a various stage, even finished, where I feel like it addresses an underserved audience. I'm personally, as a white woman or as a European woman, I'm not interested to compete with everybody else about a white A-list actor. It's not exciting for me. They're African American, they're Latino, they're Asian audiences who are underserved. They're music audiences who are underserved. They're millennials who do not care who is in it. I mean, we're living in the world of social influencer, and they don't care about those names, the household A-list names we grew up. I find it way more exciting, to tell story where the narrative really creates more equality and models a better world. I mean, you look at the Hollywood world, and everybody is cast white most of the time. I think some diversity is coming up, and I just don't find that interesting. I don't find it justifiable to an American audience, and I find it an incredible insult to an international audience. So that's just where it's going for me. The international marketplace, it's very interesting. I think is sometimes slightly delayed what's happening in the US, but then on the other hand, it's really becoming a trend maker for American audiences as well. There's the traditional film finance model, which most companies who make bigger films adhere to, and I agree with it. I'm currently working on 2 bigger films where I have A-list directors, and I develop and I own the rights, and I adhere to the exact same model. It's bankable, means you're selling foreign a certain percentage, maybe 65 to 70%, the rest goes against the US. And exactly by working with, sales agent, and you work with the same people over and over because who delivers, and they will tell you, oh, Jim Carrey means that, and, Emma Stone means that. And so you know exactly who means what. For me, I feel like I'm not as excited to make those big films currently, right? Because I feel like the international marketplace needs to justify, towards their own audience, that they buying something or they get the rights for something they can offset in their own marketplace without a major loss. Otherwise, it would, sabotage, or it would inflate the business. But again, I think it's boring to say, oh, what are we doing internationally? I feel like if you have a really, really good script, or let's say that if you have a script who could be a good script and it's not a good script, it doesn't matter what's international. It doesn't matter what's domestic. It matters, do you believe in it? Do you have the passion in it? How do you make it better? And then you have to do the due diligence, and you have to pull yourself through the exercise, which it's a game changer 2 years ago. Asking yourself, who is the audience? And you figure out your own focus group before the movie is finished, before the movie is in production. How would an audience welcome a picture like this? And if your answer is positive, then I believe you figure out the finance plan for the picture. They're spending 50, 80, 150 million. Most of the studio movies this year didn't perform. Why? Because our audiences are more sophisticated. We're living in a world where we look at psychographics, and psychographics are so complex that it's not as easy to pinpoint down an audience because their race and their ethnicity, is pointing in one direction only. I believe it's helpful to have a director first. One of my movies, I have a big A-list director, and he would consider it a great insult if we would go, about over his head, deciding who is the cast. It just doesn't work this way. If you work with a very credible, bona fide director, this person is your partner, and you don't make any decision without this person. I think most actors have the desire to understand who they will be directed with. So I'm probably more traditional thinking in that category. I do believe you want your director on board before you go to cast. I have some very good and we had some very good bad experiences over the years. The worst thing what could happen by having a sales agent, that your money is not returned to you, that the collection, because one point is you want a sales agent who is a good seller, who believes in your movie, who has affinity for your movie. But I believe that's 15%, but it's very important 15%. And then there's 50% that you will take the time, and you probably will make at least 5 to 10 phone calls, and you talk to other producers and production companies who worked with the sales agent, and you will not just say, oh, how did he sell? That's like the second important question. The first important question is, did you get his money back? What was the experience in this sales agent being very accountable in terms of collection? There are, in each budget category, sales agents who are very well known, and every sales agent sort of has a reputation which is very easily accessible, and I believe that's the right way to go. But it's amazing to find a sales agent who really develops a passion for your film, because you can make a business deal with a sales agent, but if he's not behind your film, it doesn't work either. But I feel like the economic terms and the reputation of the sales agent is very important. To the writer, filmmaker, talk to the writer, director. He can explain to you why it's ready for production. And I think the most common mistake that from anybody who does it for the first time, most likely, rightfully so, considers himself a filmmaker. And maybe has the idea, the entitlement of thinking, I know best because this is my baby. And that's when things go very wrong, that, a script is being greenlit before it's really ready, and not enough second qualified opinions are being attained from people who really understand, structure and character and plot. And one writer never, like I've never worked on a movie where one writer can bring it to the finishing line. It's just impossible that one writer really has the skill set to understand the characters and the nuances and the plot and the pacing, and it's not possible. So I think the biggest mistakes are being made is having too much ambition and not allowing other people to really safeguard. And I think the second biggest mistakes, that movies are often budgeted very wrong, that, a lot of the money goes on screen, and then there's absolutely no money for publicity, and there's absolutely no money to get the movie in festivals, and that people assume, my God, we made a great movie, I'm sure we're playing in the festival, but you still need money even if you get in a little festival. Like, there's this very sad statistics that bigger studios have a bigger budget for movies to get into Oscars because they're running an Oscar campaign. So if you're an Academy member, you already heard about the movie, and you have to watch like so many movies. You psychologically choose the movie you heard about, but you might neglect the movie you never heard about because nobody made you aware of it, because nobody thought about putting a publicity budget in your budget once the movie is finished. So I think, to sum it up, the biggest mistakes are being made not to bring on a senior person as a guidance and follow that. I think, sometimes filmmaking can seem, which it is, a very passionate endeavor, but I feel like it's a business endeavor as well, because somebody will hand you money. And even if it's your own money, I would assume, you want it back.